Okay, so we have already discussed yesterday. Uh, Last couple of classes we discussed about the plane wave, uh, starting from Maxwell's equations in free space and in homogeneous isotropic medium. And there is a chance that electric field and magnetic field can be out of phase. And as I discussed that this electromagnetic field originates from a source, but it can propagate in free space where there is no source, even if it is homogeneous medium and isotropic medium and there is no source, but it can actually propagate and it can carry the energy. Now the next question is how to estimate energy, how much energy is flowing. We have the solutions and we know that what is the amplitude and what is their phase, all those type of things we have already derived how they are related. And now we would like to show that how energy is conserved in any electromagnetic wave propagation. So that is actually first time it is derived. It was derived by Poynting. So it is called Poynting theorem. Actually. So to understand the Poynting theorem, or to understand how energy is conserved in an electromagnetic wave propagation, we just start with Maxwell's equation. Two curl equations we consider. First curl equation is the curl E equal to minus del B del T. Instead of minus del B del T, we are writing minus mu del H del T. You know that B equal to mu H, we have discussed earlier. And both sides, since it is a curl of E, what we do, we take dot product with H field because they are anyway coupled, you know. So we can take dot product from the both in either side, and then we come to this equation. If you see that the right hand side, if you just concentrate on right hand side, the right hand side can be written like this: H dot H. You know, if you do partial derivative, then you will get two terms. That's why one terms will be just cancelled, because that's why 2 is coming here. And this thing can be read, if you just take this inside del del T, you take outside, then it will become del del T half mu H square. That's a scalar one. Okay, that is equation 13. What I see here, you just note that if you are taking just a dot product with H, then right hand side becomes rate of change of half mu H square. And from the magnetostatics, you know that half mu H square is the energy density due to the magnetic field. So any point in space, that can be material medium also, there the energy density, we know, we derive that, we can derive. I think I don't want to derive here, but you know that magnetostatics, you can find that half mu H square. So it is a rate of change of magnetic energy. Similarly, if we take other curl equation, that means curl of H, and then curl of H, you take a dot product with E. It is similar to other curl equation. Then, since in this equation, curl of H equation, you have additional term that conducting current is there, J was there, sigma E, that becomes sigma E square. And then del D del T term, that is epsilon, del E del T, and E dot is there. Again, you simplify, you will get sigma E square plus half del del T, half epsilon E square, del del T of half epsilon E square. So again, this one is the energy density due to electric field. Okay. So if you compare 13 and 14, you have additional term sigma E square, that is nothing but energy dissipation because of the ohmic laws. That means it is, if you start from Ohm's law, then you know I square R is the Joule heating. So that is the term it is coming here, sigma E square. Because of the conductivity is there, something is conducting. If electric field is there, so charge motion will be there, some current will be there, and because of that, there will be some kind of ohmic loss, ohmic energy, I would say here, sigma E square. And this is the rate of change of electrostatic energy density due to electric field, right? So if you just compare equation 13 and 14, these two if you compare, that means just you compare and you just try to use some vector identity. Left hand side is this one, H dot curl of E, E dot curl of H, and right hand side you have this energy rate of change of magnetic energy, rate of change of electrical energy. Now you compare this left hand side, it involves actually three vectors, vector quantity, that means H, E, and this del also. Del also is a vector here if you consider. So if you just think about the vector identity, divergence of A cross B, if you just think, and through vector identity, vector calculus, you can actually expand that. You can expand that with B dot curl of A and A dot curl of B. So you can think of A equal to A vector is equal to E and B vector equal to H, right? So just you see this one, this thing is nothing but left hand side of the H dot curl of E, E dot curl of H. So that means if you just subtract, then you can get divergence of A cross B means divergence of E cross H it will come. It's a straightforward vector identity. You don't need to make it very complicated things. So it's a simple straightforward thing you will be getting. So just if you subtract these two, 13 and 14, then left hand side will become divergence of E cross H, and right hand side, equation 13, you have your half mu H square del T, it is written here, half epsilon E square del T, and minus sigma E square, of course, is there. So basically subtracting 13 and 14, you get equation of 15. So now you do a little bit, you ultimately want to see the energy conservation. It is ultimately coming as energy, equation 13 and 14, rate of change of energy. So you want to see how energy is being conserved when electromagnetic wave propagates through the medium or free space. Now left hand side, if you see divergence of E cross H. E cross H, if you see, it is another vector. So A cross B always gives you another vector perpendicular to both A and B. Similarly, this is some quantity you will be getting that is actually both perpendicular to E and H. And you see that vector is divergence of that vector in the left hand side. Now you do one thing, you take because right hand side, if you see, it is energy density. So if you want to get the information about total energy, then what you have to do, you have to integrate, because this equation is it is actually true for a point space. So at a particular coordinate, these things true, because all these equation, Carl equation, all the Maxwell's equation in divergence form we are writing, divergence and Carl form, they are actually in another way, it is called, that is a point form of Maxwell's equation. That means at a particular point that is valid, any particular point. If you have electric field, if you have a magnetic field and current density and everything, if it is defined, then that particular point, all these relationship holds. So now to get overall energy for a particular volume, if you say, that entire volume if you consider, that means you are just taking integral of the equation 15, volume integral. So if you take volume integral left side, volume integral right side. So that is what, taking volume integral both side, you are getting equation 16 from 15. So just you are writing VB, UCB, VB, and you are integrating over differential volume dV space wise. So that means when I am just integrating energy density over a volume, that means I supposed to get a total energy and then del del T, rate of change of that energy. That is what we are trying to see, right? So then this left hand side, if you see, that is a divergence of volume integral of the divergence of a vector. And there is a, I think you have learned already in your vector calculus, that divergence theorem. So divergence of a vector, if you take volume integral, that actually can be written as surface integral of that vector over the closed surface. That volume, whatever volume it occupies, so you take entire surface integral of that vector, the dot product. That is called surface integral. So from the divergence theorem, equation 16, and left hand side, that divergence of that vector volume integral will become surface integral of that vector. Okay, that is a divergence theorem. I think any textbook you can find also, and you can prove also. It's straightforward. And right hand side we are keeping as it is, a little bit rearranged. First we are writing this energy density for the electric field and energy density for the magnetic field, and then so and so, sigma E square is the ohmic loss, etc. So now we try to interpret this equation 17. So you consider a volume, and then in that volume this part says that how much energy being lost because of the Joule heating. Because whenever electromagnetic wave propagates in a material medium where you have some kind of sigma, that because of sigma means there is a charge can transport, conductivity is there. So because of that conductivity, so current will flow, and that current causes some kind of I square R, Joule heating. So that means some energy will be dissipated there. And this part, basically total energy density of comprised of electric field and magnetic field. And then you take the rate of change in that particular volume, how much it is changing per second, per unit time. It can be positive, it can be negative also. That means if it is positive means something is you are getting energy out of the medium. Some source must be there. And if it is negative means, that means, or maybe somewhere that energy is coming, negative means that particular region the energy will be dropping and it will be going somewhere else, outside. So if you just think this thing, we interpret total power leaving the volume can be written as rate of decrease in energy stored in electric and magnetic fields. Okay, energy decrease, rate of energy decrease. That means that is, if it is decreased, that much only will be coming out, right? But that will not be entirely coming out. Something will be lost because of the ohmic power dissipation, this part. So that means what, if you just see the right hand side only, right hand side, rate of decrease in energy stored in electric and magnetic fields minus ohmic power dissipation, that must be the total power leaving the volume, right? So this right hand side actually it says that rate of decrease, negative sign, and then this is loss. So negative sign means actually we are writing rate of decrease, that's why we are no more writing here negative sign, positive sign. And this negative sign means it is a loss, completely lost. And then that is actually coming as a total power leaving the volume. So that means right hand side, if you just solve this part, whatever you get, that is the left hand side. That left hand side is the energy flowing out of the volume, right? So this is a simple model here. If you see, we say that this sigma, that is actually, this is a volume, some arbitrary volume it is chosen here. And in that volume, you just think about that some power coming in and some power coming out. That means that is the total part, if I just consider this 17 right hand side. So you will have a ohmic loss, and then here it is shown that stored electrical energy, and then two parallel plate like things it is shown. You know what? That is nothing but a capacitor. So, you know, in capacitor, energy store, normally when you solve the how much energy stored in a capacitor, that is actually, we know that that is half CV square, the potential difference, and capacitance, that half average energy if you just consider. Here also you see it is half epsilon E square. So instead of V voltage, you are writing E, because this epsilon and epsilon also, it is actually distributed capacitance like things, and it is, you can consider it a volt per meter. So that is how it is actually equivalent to energy stored if the medium you are just making equivalent like a combination of resistor, capacitor and inductor, similar to half CV square. Here you are getting say half LHS square or so. So that means in a medium, it can be free space. If it is free space, it is mu will be replaced by mu naught and epsilon will be replaced by epsilon naught. So the medium can be decomposed into, or maybe can be considered as a combination of some resistor, some capacitor, some inductor. So in capacitor and inductor, normally they are active element. They are actually energy can be stored, and if it is ideal, if they are ideal, they store energy, and it can release also. It can release also, but in the process, it will not lose anything. Anything is being lost, that is because of the sigma. So anything power coming in, that actually will see how much capacitor can, it will see how much capacitor, equivalent capacitor can store, how much inductor can store, and how much can be lost, and their resultant will tell you how much will be coming out. Okay, so even though we know that electromagnetic wave propagating in unbounded medium, homogeneous or even in homogeneous case also, the model stands holds actually. So in that case, we can actually see the medium as some kind of circuit, LCR circuit type things we can consider. Okay, that is a model, but mathematically, if you see that this is a vector, E cross H is a vector, left hand side of equation 17. So that vector we represent as a P. So this P is a vector here, that is called Poynting vector. So this Poynting vector is the E cross H. So at a particular point, whatever E cross H result comes, that is obviously normal to both E and H. That vector, you take whatever vector value comes in the surface region. That surface region, every point you take and take a differential area, and then you add entire surface. That means that is actually called as a flux or Poynting vector. Then that thing actually gives you the value, whatever you are saying, that what is the flux coming out of the volume. So it should be noted that P is normal to both and E and H. Energy flows along AK such that AK equal to, AK means energy K, that means K is an index here, that means that says that in that direction, particular direction, unit vector AK, and energy will be flowing in that direction. That is actually AE. That means the unit vector along E, unit vector along H, their cross product, then you can get energy flowing. But remember that E cross H equal to whatever P it is coming, and earlier we have shown that this E field and H field, they are actually perpendicular to each other. If, only if it is a free space and if it is a homogeneous isotropic medium. If it is anisotropic medium, you can find that this E and H may not be perpendicular. Okay, so nevertheless, their cross product actually gives you the energy flow in that particular direction. And if you use that E field, H field, earlier also you have seen, you can recollect that electric field and magnetic field solutions, we have considered as complex form, exponential e to the power j omega t minus beta z and so on. That's a complex. So electric field and magnetic field, if you are considering complex, then actually complex you are using just for mathematical calculations. Ultimately, you have to consider at the end the real part of that. So real part of that means cos omega t minus beta z. Okay. So or phi, if it is initial phase is there, phase has to be considered. So if you want to take a average value, so you take cos omega t and then their vector direction and then take a cross product with the H field, that also real part, then you get the average value without any problem. But whenever you are just using complex form, then the average energy, you have to consider that half of the real part of E cross H star. Actually, mathematically, you can prove also. If some sine functions is there, and then real part if you are considering and taking a average, but if you use the exponential term, then again you try to see the average. The average will be whatever value will come because of that E cross H, and then real part if you take, that is not the average value. You have to take a half factor. Then only it is actually equal to when you are considering E and H is the real. Since you are considering complex and then you are using here complex value, exponential term E, if it is E is there and H field you have to take complex conjugate, then that will be a complex value. You take real part of that and then divide it by 2, then only it will be average, time average basically. So what that means, this gives you the energy flow, average energy flow per unit area, because you know after integrating over ds, then only you get a total energy, that is called power, overall power. That's why it is written here the power in and power out. Whenever integrating together, then you are getting power. Otherwise it is basically a so-called intensity or energy flow per unit area. And then average energy, this one per unit area per second, whatever the intensity is there, that is actually called energy. Okay, so this is average energy. If E field is there, H field is there, if you want to evaluate what is the average energy, then you can find this. You have to solve these equations. Mathematically, I think many steps I have just removed because this is the basic thing. I suppose that in your undergraduate courses you have learned all this. Even first level physics course also, these things are normally taught most of the time. I see. Sometimes it may be skipped, but this is a very fundamental basic things. So you need to understand that electromagnetic wave, even if it is there is no source, it can travel without any problem in free space and homogeneous medium without source. It can travel, it can carry energy, and that energy you can estimate if you have the knowledge of the electric field function and magnetic field function. Then you can find how much energy it is been flowing. So this is the ultimate. If something given, if you have some way of measuring electric field and magnetic field, then you can find out what is the average energy flowing out at a particular point per unit area. Okay. So this is important. That means electromagnetic wave is nothing but, if we want to use them for practical purpose, it can be power transmission, one place to another place. You want to transfer the power, electrical power, electromagnetic power, that can happen. Or if you are using this electromagnetic wave for communication purpose, there also this energy flow, that is actually the main thing, energy flows. And that energy, how you are actually manipulating them and for your information flow, That actually the subject of communication technology. So ultimately energy that matters. Electromagnetic wave, that is a combination of, that is actually nothing but it's a, ultimately at the end of the day it's an energy flow. But that energy flow, what type of energy? It's a electromagnetic energy, right? And that energy will be traveling. Now next thing, so we now know that energy will be flowing, and that direction of flow is that you have to see in which direction electric field is oscillating, which direction magnetic field is oscillating, and you take their cross product, and then you can find out your energy. Now, so far we have discussed that, okay, all the solutions, if you see for understanding purpose, we forcefully consider that, okay, let us consider electric field is along x direction. Then we found that, well, if electric field is x direction, if it is homogeneous or free space, then magnetic field will be in the y direction. Then we found ultimately that energy will be flowing or wave is propagating is perpendicular to both E and H. And that if one is x direction, another will be y direction, electric field x direction, magnetic field y direction, then propagation direction must be along z. That is what we understood. That it is well defined. If you have a reference system, x and y coordinate system is well defined, then you say, okay, electric field is in this direction and magnetic field in this direction. So obviously, energy is in the z direction. But many situations you see your practical device, you may not be able to represent it like a perfect x-axis, perfect y-axis, and you are posting your electromagnetic wave will be propagating always in the z direction. It can happen that because of the reflection, etc., it can change the direction, right? So you need really some kind of generic equation, right? So you know that electric field earlier we have represented, if we go back a couple of slides backward, see this electric field we express something like this, right? Here, equation 12. Let us forget about loss. Say electric field is e to the power j omega t minus beta z, and e to the power j omega t minus beta z. Additional phase will be there, h naught and e naught, right? So here you see omega t term is time dependent variation, and beta z is that beta is a propagation vector, propagation constant we consider. That beta we can express, no? Beta value it is expressed in equation 11. If sigma equal to 0, it is much more easier to understand. It will be if sigma equal to 0, then beta is real, of course, and then entire thing is real, of course. This is the thing, but this is z direction, so we can see the phase variation along z direction. But if you consider that this field or the wave traveling along arbitrary direction, not z direction, nor x direction, y direction, you have a xyz definition is there for your system, for your device. You can define, okay, this is my x axis, this is y axis, this is z axis. But in that device, electromagnetic wave can have many boundaries. It can actually travel many directions, arbitrary direction. So in that case, can we write this beta z? We cannot. So in that case, we have to modify that equation, electromagnetic field equations, like this. So if you are considering a certain direction of propagation, then that particular direction, instead of beta, we actually assign a vector, and that vector is called k. And we have to see in a certain r direction what is the phase. That means both k and r is now vector. So no more beta like a scalar and z like a scalar. If it is one dimension, z is a scalar type things, right? But if it is arbitrary direction propagating, suppose k direction propagating, and you want to see at position r what is the phase, that means you have to take k dot r. That means you have to see the projection of the k vector onto the r position vector. So this is actually qualitatively I can explain that. Actually you can solve directly three-dimensional Maxwell's equations, and then you can get a solution. But since we try to understand in one dimension, very simplified way, and then if we want to draw a conclusion that if the electromagnetic wave propagating in arbitrary direction, say k direction, that means energy is flowing in that k direction, then if I want to know what is the phase variation along r at point r, then we have to see k dot r. Okay, that means k can be, you can decompose into x component, kx component, ky component, kz component. Similarly, r is your x coordinate, y coordinate, z coordinate, and then you can write kx x, ky y, kz z, and so on. That is how you can write. Similarly, magnetic field. Okay, if E naught and H naught are real, then you can say that E naught and H naught, both electric field and magnetic field are in phase for that particular direction, right? Of course, there can be a vector that particular direction. So this is the general solution. So anything electromagnetic wave, if you want to deal classically, this is actually Maxwell's equation. You are treating electromagnetic wave using Maxwell's equation. That is actually classical thing. And you know that electric field can be expressed in volt per meter, magnetic field can be expressed in ampere per meter, and then E cross H, you know that volt times ampere per meter square, that means your power, energy flow per unit area, right? So on all these things we can get very easily. And whatever we discussed earlier, that this k, mode of k, is nothing but your beta. Beta for that value, and then you can assign beta is equal to 2 pi by lambda square root of epsilon r when sigma equal to 0, right? When sigma equal to 0, we have just discussed other day that how this beta will be there, 2 pi by lambda epsilon r, and 2 pi by lambda square root of epsilon r is the Nm, that is Nm actually refractive index of the medium, and then phase velocity of the electromagnetic wave in a direction of its propagation is then omega by k, that is called phase velocity. If you see that omega by k, omega equal to 2 pi c by lambda, omega equal to 2 pi f, and this k here, mod of k is equal to 2 pi by lambda, right? And Nm will be there. That means phase velocity will be c by Nm. So that means if you know the refractive index in a homogeneous dielectric isotropic dielectric medium, and the refractive index is known, so phase velocity will be actually scaled c by Nm. Typically this Nm value is more than 1. For free space we consider it is epsilon r equal to 1. So Nm will be 1. But most of the time this Nm equal to greater than 1. So phase velocity of any electromagnetic wave, that can be light wave also, the phase velocity is always smaller in the material medium in normal case. But certain situation you will find that this Nm can be smaller than 1. So in that case Vp will be higher than the phase velocity, velocity of light. So phase velocity can be higher than the velocity of light. But when we say that from the Einstein's relativity theory that nothing can propagate faster than light. So that means that is not phase. Phase is exception. When he says something, that means some object. So something, some particle maybe, something object-like thing, having some mass or something like that, or yeah, may not be mass, but it can be energy. If you consider the energy of electromagnetic wave, that actually will not follow this phase velocity. We discussed that this wave is propagating with a phase velocity omega by beta, which is actually c by Nm. That is true, but whenever energy we are considering, that energy normally if it is a monochromatic wave, then fine, that energy will be traveling also with the same velocity. But whenever you are using this electromagnetic wave for sending some information, some energy modulation or something you are doing, When that information is traveling, and if you try to, if you ask that what is the velocity, that time this phase velocity is not the answer. That time you have to include one more term that is called group velocity. So qualitatively, if I just try to explain that, you know, in a whenever encoding a information into electromagnetic wave, that means you are just giving some kind of high, low, on, off, all those type of things. Whenever you are modulating that, that means some additional frequency will be generated. So when multiple frequencies will be there, then the information or energy will be propagating like a pulse, like a packet of pulses. So that packet, that envelope, energy envelope, that will travel not at the velocity of a single or carrier frequency velocity. So that will be some kind of collective envelope how it propagates. I think any standard book, if you see, you will find that group velocity is something relatively, most of the cases, the group velocity is lower than the phase velocity. Or that means the group velocity in typical cases cannot be higher than the velocity of light. At most, it can be velocity of light. Okay. If you have questions, you can ask me actually. If any doubt in this situation. But this type of concept you should always keep in mind. And if you have a doubt, you start a little bit exploring your textbook and also derive all these equations. Whatever equations I have presented here, some step jumps are there. I suggest you, I think it will not take much time. If you have some basic understanding, then it will not take much time. You just a little bit recap on it. Okay. Now, so now we will be just entering into slowly into quantum things. So classically, we understood that that electromagnetic wave, it propagates and it is nothing but energy, and this energy is used for your information communication, data communication, all those type of things. It is used. That is fine. Now another part of the story is that was actually from 1835 or 1865. It was continued for more than 35 years, and everyone was happy because all the wave nature, all the physical phenomena experienced till that time, everyone could explain, and Maxwell was that time like a hero actually, because of the celebrated equation. Everyone was praising that, and all of the physical phenomena could be explained. And this is 1900. So after about 35 years, that means 1900 means I'm talking about 120 years ago. This is, I am just giving a little bit of historical background so that quickly, it will not take much time, so that you can understand that this light wave, whatever the energy we are talking about, that is not so easy thing, just calculating energy and you get everything all right. It's not that. Many things you cannot explain using that wave theory. So one phenomena is the black body radiation. Also, you heard about that, black body radiation. So from there, actually, concept of photon came. How concept of photon came out? I want to just go through it quickly. So actually, before this 1900, I think people did some kind of experiment that when a heated body, if you just try to see that heat radiation taking place and try to see what is the intensity spectrum, that means as a frequency dependent, what is the spectrum. So typically, experimentally, if you see, it normally follows this type of path as a function of frequency, radiation intensity. Any black body, if you just try to plot experimental value, you can have some kind of spectrum analyzer, monochromator type things, and then every frequency you just try to find what is the intensity. Okay. for example, we can consider our sun is a black body. It is radiating all frequencies. If you try to see the frequency dependent intensity, the nature of the curve will be like this. A certain frequency it will be maximum, and then beyond that it will be reducing, and this will be reducing. This is experimental phenomena. Then as a physicist, many people try to explain why it is happening, physics point of view. So there are many efforts were there. One effort was that is actually I have just shown here, Rayleigh-Jeans law. Okay, Rayleigh-Jeans law, but that is actually using some classical thermodynamical phenomena. People they were basically thermodynamics expert. Okay, so they consider some kind of thermodynamic property and tried to explain or derive analytical formula that if some object is heated, what would be the intensity as a function of temperature. They end up with this equation: 8 pi nu square by c cube kT. T is the temperature of that body and K is the Boltzmann constant. Okay, that is that time whatever known physics, thermodynamics they used, and using that they came out with this type of formula. So this formula, what it says, as a function of frequency, you know, it's kind of parabola type thing, mu square. Suppose for a given temperature, T is constant, K is the Boltzmann constant, 8 pi constant, C cube, C is the velocity of light constant. So nu square means it will be going like this. So that means at a higher frequency, it will go to infinity. So as the frequency goes up, it will be infinity. That theory that time it was saying. But practically we are getting like this. You see, even though that theory gives something going to infinity, somewhere it should be broken down. I think some breakdown is there. Otherwise, it will be something huge. If you can just increase the temperature and then you can find huge energy. But that is not happening. That's why it is called, whatever theory is coming out, they say that the ultraviolet catastrophe. Ultraviolet means, mu higher means it's an ultraviolet light. Okay, you know that's a VIBGYOR, if you just read longer wavelength and then go to the violet and blue violet and then ultraviolet, their frequency is higher. So it is happening. So that could not explain the experimental things. Then Max Planck is also thermodynamics expert. He tried to model this. So sometimes when your fundamental theory breaks, normally as an engineer, what you do, you try to model with some fitting parameter, so that that model equation you can use for your fabricating, designing a device for certain applications. So while modeling that, he found he has to consider that energy for a certain frequency at any point, it is actually increased but not continuously. It increases with epsilon, 2 epsilon, 3 epsilon. Some epsilon is constant thing he has to consider, and then epsilon, 2 epsilon, 3 epsilon if he is considered. But epsilon can be small, very small, but not tends to 0. Obviously not equal to 0. It has to be that way. So that means at a particular frequency, if you see what is the energy, minimum energy, you have to consider epsilon. And then next level of energy, it will be 2 epsilon. Next level of energy, 3 epsilon. So discretization he has considered. And after considering that, he came out with this equation. And in this equation, apart from nu kT, he has to consider one particular fitting parameter called H. That time he was using B. Later on, it was converted into H. Okay. And he found that if you just fit this value, H, with this value, 6.626 10 to the minus 34 joules second, then actually it gives you, it matches well with your experimental result. Okay. So that means he has to consider some kind of quantization. So energy is quantized, discretized, epsilon, 2 epsilon, 3 epsilon, and so on. So this concept of energy quanta came that time first. Before that, Maxwell's equation, if you just consider, you are just considering integration, total energy, all those type of things, this quantization concept was not there before 1900. So he was the first who introduced this type of quantization. But he himself actually never believed, because he was a thermodynamics expert. He was just handling Boltzmann equations, all those type of things. He himself said this cannot be real. This is just for some other background physics must be there. What I did some kind of fitting model just for engineering solution. So he himself never believed that actually energy is something like that quantized for electromagnetic wave. All right. So then, photoelectric effect came. Another scientist, that is Philip Lenard. He was actually completely experimentalist. Philip Lenard actually got Nobel Prize because of cathode ray discovery. Okay. So he was observing some peculiar thing while doing that cathode ray experiment. That is also, from the school level also, photoelectric effect. If you just shine a light into a metal, then you know that electrons are coming out, and then those electrons velocity, maximum velocity. This is the experimental setup. Maximum velocity you can measure, and that maximum velocity actually depends on frequency, it never depends on the intensity of the light. If you increase the intensity of light, it is peculiar. I think in common sense, if you say that, okay, if anything electrons are coming out, if intensity is increased, that means your emitted electrons will be higher and higher energy. But he found that it is actually frequency dependent, maximum velocity. But he could not explain, because he is not theoretic. He was an experimentalist and not having not much interest in theory. Then this Einstein, great Einstein that time, he actually observed. He was presenting in a conference, and Einstein was there, and he noted down, and he says that, well, this expression can be, whatever the results are coming out, that can be expressed like this. This is electron mass and velocity, and that can be written as h nu minus phi m, and that h is nothing but whatever Planck introduced, that h. So he then considered, Einstein's remark was that when a light ray is spreading from a point, light ray, earlier electromagnetic wave, you remember Maxwell's equation, electromagnetic energy, Poynting vector, and so on. But he says that when a light ray is spreading from a point, the energy is not distributed continuously over ever increasing spaces. Suppose a beam of light is coming, that time Einstein thought, okay, energy is not everywhere distributed. It is actually like a point. At a particular point, some energy is consolidated, and maybe neighboring space, nothing is there. Okay, but consists of a finite number of energy quanta that are localized in points in space, move without dividing, and can be absorbed or generated only as a whole. So from light, only h nu amount of energy will be absorbed by electrons, which is bound to the metal. Then electron needs certain energy to overcome the what do you call that? How much binding energy with the metal? That is actually called work function. And that work function, if it is subtracted, rest of the energy is actually taken by the electron as a free electron with velocity Vm, maximum velocity. So you can imagine that it is not h nu by 2. It cannot absorb h nu by 2. half of that h nu, half of h nu, or it cannot be 3 h nu by 2 and then it can acquire energy, or 3 h nu by 3, 5 or so on. It cannot be a fraction. Only it can take only one photon, one electron, and that is the thing. So as a whole it goes, and the concept is that when you do experiment, when you will be doing research also, you will understand that you have to think like that. You have to try to visualize that. Well, the electrons coming out, and it's a continuous electromagnetic wave. And how a electron is kind of point mass, right? Electron has a mass, it has a size, and how it can acquire energy like this. So he concluded that it is probably energy is in like a point, particle is there. That particle when interact hit with the electron, that time it is completely given energy to the electron, and in return electron gives a little bit of energy to satisfy the binding energy of the metal and then come out. So he actually gave the idea, Einstein, that's a quantum, Lichtquanten. Actually in German word, he named it as a Lichtquanten. Licht means light quanta. So that light quanta concept actually given by Einstein, and you know, he got Nobel Prize because of this. He did not get Nobel Prize because of its relativity, though that is actually most celebrated one. All right, so that is actually 1905. So now this is the thing. I think you won't find most of the textbook. It is actually a very fantastic idea, also explained by Einstein's. So Einstein actually he actually did some kind of dramatic conceptual change from Maxwell's theory, that energy is like a quanta of electromagnetic wave. Energy of electromagnetic wave is like quanta, point-like things. I think it is already 7 o'clock. I need to maybe 3 minutes. This slide I will conclude today. So what he did, he was just doing, still continuing his work on some kind of black body radiation, and he was deriving a theory on energy density fluctuations. You know, Hohlraum. Hohlraum means, it's a German word again. Raum means space. Hole means hollow space. Hollow space, if you just consider, suppose a black body cavity you are considering, and that cavity, if you are hitting, and then all sorts of electromagnetic radiation will come out, and all the radiation will be there inside the cavity. This is a chamber, hollow space. Now you are hitting, then whatever radiation is radiating, that will be staying inside, right? And steady state temperature it is attained, for example. Now, if you just consider a particular point inside the chamber, then his theory shows that the energy at a particular point or particular differential volume, if you consider inside the chamber, the energy is not constant, remaining constant. It's fluctuating. And the theory also he developed from the concept of this energy quanta, as well as your black body radiation, all those type of thing concept. And then he just found this mean square energy fluctuations he derived. And astonishingly, he got these two terms. I think this is a nice paper here. If you want to read that one, what is the thought behind this derivation, you can find. That was recently actually reviewed very nicely by Varu. That's a Fluctuation and Noise Later in 2006. Okay, actually it was done in 1909, but you see that interest still goes on till 2006. Even I saw that some paper on this theory very recently also. So if you try to see that what are the symbols, if all the symbols you know, I think additional term is eta naught. Eta naught is nothing but the average energy in the subvolume V. So you are considering a very small subvolume inside the cavity, and inside that cavity, if you try to find out what is the total energy fluctuation over time. So that fluctuation energy, average fluctuation energy, if you square, if you just consider, then you have one term is this one, h nu times eta naught, that is the average energy, times h nu, and eta naught square here, and this is c cubed 8 pi nu square. It is something like that, whatever Rayleigh is there, similar type of thing is there. With that, you have delta nu is there. So it is something, this term is from nu to delta nu, all the spectrum it is considered. So it actually says something continuum. But here if you see, this is actually this least quantum, photon h nu. So this thing actually shows that this energy fluctuation can be decomposed into two terms. First term is nothing but point-like energy, quantum, light quantum is there, and another is something like that, continuous, nu to nu plus delta nu. So actually now all the scientists are saying probably this is the first mathematical correct quantum formula showing the wave particle duality. So any radiation, electromagnetic radiation, you just trying to understand what is the energy fluctuations, because you know this energy fluctuation, this is the fluctuation starts at 1909 with Einstein derivation. Entire quantum mechanics, quantum technology, you will see that actually relies on this fluctuation, that uncertainty, and all these things actually it is originated from here. So that fluctuations is there, and that fluctuations can be decomposed into two terms, one coming out of because of the wave nature, another coming out of that nature. The particle-like fluctuation first term comes from the spontaneous processes of this is important thing you should remember, because we'll be coming back to this again. The particle-like fluctuation comes from the spontaneous process of the radiation matter interaction. I think if you just try to recollect that spontaneous emission, perhaps you know, particularly those who are physics background, you have learned a little bit of laser. So there is a not even not laser. If you just take your common high school knowledge, like if you just consider your hydrogen atom, for example, hydrogen atom, if it is electrons are excited to higher state, then you know that comes down and you get all these lines like Lyman series, Balmer series, all those type of things you have learned in high school, right? So those things, what it says, well, when electrons goes to higher excited states, and from excited states it comes down to lower state, then some photon light will be coming out. Energy will be coming out as electromagnetic wave. That those are the lines. Sodium, you have yellow lines. Sodium ions, you have yellow lines. But nowhere you learned that why that electron should release energy when it is in the excited state, when it should come down to lower state. Because quantum mechanically, if you see, they are actually stable state. That means electron can actually, even if you just consider your Bohr model, right? So they are actually specific cell. So electrons can stay there. But when it sees that lower energy state is empty, it will jump. What causes this jump? So that is actually kind of fluctuations. We'll learn that there is called some certain kind of vacuum fluctuations takes place, some noise is there, and that noise, that particle-like fluctuations, this noise-like fluctuations when happens, that comes down and then you get the particle-like things. So that is nothing but spontaneous process. When something related to spontaneous thing happening, that origin is some kind of fluctuation is there, and that fluctuation you cannot explain classically. That is actually quantum mechanics. That is actually quantum mechanics. So that is any spontaneous things happening, that is something unpredictable, and that is known as quantum process, and that is our actually subject for entire technology, whatever we'll be developing and understanding, right? And then wave-like fluctuations, another term. So this is the two important thing actually Einstein commented that time in 1909. One is spontaneous process, that is because of the particle nature, and the other thing, the fluctuation, that wave-like fluctuation, that is second term, are stemming from induced process. So induced process means, suppose you have a electron in excited state, and before it is coming down, because of the quantum process, if you have external agencies coming and it is forcing, inducing something, it is disturbing so that it comes down, that is actually called so-called coming, that happens because of the wave-like nature, and that is normally called stimulated process. That time he says that absorption and negative absorption and that time gain, that concept, that terminology he has not used. Instead of that, absorption opposite negative absorption he considered in his paper. Okay, so that means, so there are two processes. This wave-like fluctuations, whatever is there, that actually contributes to stimulated emission, stimulated transition, and particle-like fluctuations, that actually this is actually quantum nature inherently built here, and actually that contributes to the spontaneous process. So in quantum photonics, actually the spontaneous process is most important. So if it is some kind of, somehow you are getting spontaneous emission, spontaneous process, that means you are ensured that it is some quantum phenomena is happening. Okay, and if it is stimulated emission, of course that both things you can explain through quantum origin, but normally when we are classically dealing with our lasers, etc., normally we say that okay, this is spontaneous emission, this is stimulated emission, then everything we treat as classically. Ultimately origin is quantum, but all our quantum photonics technology will be just dealing with that quantum nature. Okay, with this I just stop here, and I'll just because this type of background history, if you know, I think you can visualize it better for whenever we'll be teaching upfront. So I think that's why I need a couple of more lectures to cover this up. Okay, and if you have any questions, you can ask me very quickly, one or two, but it is already late. But I think what I suggest, you have a WhatsApp group is there and email group is there. So if you have any questions, you keep on discussing among yourselves, because if you are in a class and if you are in a hostel here in IIT, you would be interacting a lot. But now you know all of you are staying apart, and you don't have any opportunity to interact with each other. I suggest you among yourself, you socialize, and WhatsApp group is there. You just keep on asking questions. Even if I am not answering, your friend can answer. TAs will be there answering. So you just keep on chatting. Then I think it would be better. Okay. All right. So see you tomorrow.